The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
Now we need a sense of global responsibility. Think 6 billion humanity equal.
Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great.
Because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was sleeping.
It is time that we all perceive gender on a spectrum instead of two sets of opposing ideals.
We must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.
Within the sound of silence.
But in order to talk freely of those things, you have to release yourself of those pains.
You see, love liberates. It doesn't bind. Love says, I love you. I love you if you're in China. I love you if you're across town. I love you if you're in Harlem. I love you.
If you hit a talib with your shoe, then there would be no difference between you and that talib. You must not treat others that much with cruelty and that much harshly. You must fight others, but through peace and through dialogue and through education. Then I said, I'll tell him how important education is and that I even want education for your children as well. And I'll tell him, that's what I want to tell you. Now do what you want.
And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more.
You can be that great a generation.
I said that why shall I wait for someone else? Why shall I be looking to the government, to the army, that they would help us? Why don't I raise my voice? Why don't we speak up for our
One
rights?
day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
Confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
You know what's right. Just do right. You don't really have to ask anybody. The truth is, right may not be expedient. It may not be profitable, but it will satisfy your soul.
Of course, the task will not be easy, but not to do this would be a crime against humanity.
All that is needed for the forces of evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing.
Think about my granddad's lap. Think often about that night. About how some people are waiting for people like us to slide our hands against their walls and say, close your eyes. I'm going to turn on a light.
Welcome to the Forum on CHRW. My name is David Seston. In ancient Rome, the Forum stood as a place where all were able to come out and discuss matters of public interest and concern, and they were able to do so in a free and open environment. Recently at Western University and other universities around the world, students do not feel that they are able to speak their minds or ask the questions about subjects that concern them. They feel they will be judged by their friends, their peers, and their seniors because they question what's being told to them and whether what they're being told is right or wrong. We cannot have a free and just society where people are afraid to ask the questions and are afraid to speak up. This forum is a project aiming to open dialogue on these subjects that concern students. It is a place where students can talk to other students while trying to get an idea on the concepts that are floating around them without knowing why it's there. There won't be any professors or academics lecturing. This forum will be the student's voice. Because if you hear us talk about it, then maybe it's okay for you to talk about it with your friends and your classmates. The forum will focus on the what, the why, and the how. What the issue is, why it has become an issue, and how it affects Western students specifically and university students in general. What we're talking about today is the other half of feminism. In the first episode of this mini-series, we sat down with some women and talked about feminism, and today it's the guys' turn. In the last part of this series, we will be getting everyone together and having the conversation as it should be. Why this is an issue is pretty obvious. If we were to gather a bunch of guys in the street and try to engage them in the feminist conversation, the vast majority would rather be anywhere else. This is a conversation that affects both sides, from equality to gender stereotypes. But if one side doesn't feel welcome in the conversation and won't engage, then nothing will ever be accomplished. How this affects Western students is that the conversation is happening, with or without you. You can still see this conversation happening in lecture series and in symposiums, but without men engaging in the conversation, the inequality is perpetuated. All right, you're listening to The Forum, and today we're having the second part of the conversation about feminism, and today I'm joined by Zach, David. Yeah, so there's two Davids in this one. This will be a little bit interesting when you listen to it. We don't sound the same, though. And Greg is joining us again. So how's it going, guys?
Not too bad, not too bad.
So we're talking about feminism, and I will fully admit what we have right now is four guys, I forgot about myself, sitting around in a room talking about feminism, but particularly we're talking about feminism from the viewpoint of a guy, because men are the other half of the conversation. So when talking with Bianca and Athena about a feminism, it was Bianca who had this idea. I can't claim credit for it. After this, we're going to try and sit down and have a conversation with men and women at the same time, which I think should be really interesting. But I really want to get the guys' perspective on this, and particularly why guys aren't engaging. So I guess the first thing I'm going to ask is, what is feminism to you? And we'll start there and start the conversation there.
Yeah, perfect. I think feminism literally means equality to me. And that's exactly what I think the dictionary definition of it is. I think a lot of people get scared from, and by a lot of people I mean probably men in general, get scared basically just by the name itself. So just feminism as opposed to, let's say, equality or whatever you want to call it.
Okay. So the base definition for you is just pure equality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll come back to that in a minute. David, anything?
Yeah, my point of view is pretty similar to Zach's. I feel that in a general, broad sense, feminism means equality between the genders, and I guess any other kind of derivative of equality, like equality of opportunities, equality of pay, equality of treatment, and things like that.
Greg?
Yeah, I agree with these two that is kind of what feminism is, but I think it has also taken on a much larger connotation in the media and with certain movements, just because a lot of there are different kind of branches of feminism now and different kind of ways that people go about promoting it. And I think in that, people have taken feminism and made it into a lot more than just that base level. But as a base level understanding, and how I always consider feminism, is just equality between men and women. But I think a lot of what we're going to end up talking about today is how that's kind of changed for different people, and how that there are different kind of expectations for that now that it's kind of the 21st century and we're kind of pushing for a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about that. Let's continue on with that one. And guys, if you have anything you want to say, just jump in. Don't let me just ask questions. Feminism, particularly in the media, and I will blame the media completely for this one, has taken on a note of man-hating. And certain websites sort of foster that idea, not intentionally in some areas, but it does come across as that thing. So you have this concept that, I guess the easiest way to put it is a quote from Katy Perry, and the fact that I was using Taylor Swift and Kesha in the last one, and I'm quoting Katy Perry in this one, I don't know what my life has come to. But Katy Perry has most famously said that she's not a feminist because she likes men. So there is this idea of sort of militant anti-male in what is popular feminism, and how do you think that pertains? Or do you think it's a reality?
I don't know if that's necessarily popular feminism. I mean, in my experience, I don't think I've ever met somebody who calls themselves a feminist and man bashes, or somebody who says that they're... No, I
really?
Haven't. No.
I have. Several times.
Yeah, on campus.
On campus.
Yeah.
In my experience, I don't think I've ever run into that situation.
I envy that.
Not in person. Maybe through the media, like you're saying. I see that all the time.
What about social media? Have you seen it through your friends and stuff like that?
Not within my own circles.
So, and that's really, really interesting. Before I get to you guys, this is really, really interesting because I know, Zach, we've known each other since I've been back to university. Where do you attend the majority of your classes?
The majority? Well, I take half of them at Brescia.
Okay, so this is why I find it very, very interesting, because Brescia is the women's college, and you're predominantly outnumbered there, I would assume.
Yeah, there's 2 guys in my program, in my graduating year of the program.
Okay, so that's actually really, really interesting, and that actually fills my heart with warmth. I'm not going to lie, that somebody who is predominantly in a female-centric program or a female-centric environment is not experiencing this, so that's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's not... Like, I don't feel out of place when I'm there. Nobody makes me feel like I'm worth less or anything like that, which is why I don't think I've ever seen man bashing in terms of feminism. Like, I've taken classes there, like women in leadership and a whole lot of stuff like that. And there has been like a gendered focus on all of those things, because in the job world, like people, like we just aren't treated equally, and it's not fair. And in all of those classes, the professors are like almost 100% of the time level-headed and are able to like explain these things without bashing men, and the people that are learning from them, like me and all of the other people in those classes, are usually getting that sort of level-headed expertise, and then we regurgitate that when we're asked about it. So I mean, it's all just like I guess
that's actually pretty amazing. I'm not gonna lie. So however, we are going to go to the other side of the equation, because some of us have actually experienced this. So in pertaining to sort of how that sort of anti-male movement in feminism, have either of you two, so David or Greg, have you experienced it?
I have, but it's something that it's kind of difficult to put words to, just because I know it's happened and it hasn't really affected me. I've just kind of been aware of it, and it's not active in many ways. Like, I don't think it's as much as people going out and saying men suck, I hate men, men are the worst, and that sort of thing. It's more just an attitude, a really kind of passive attitude about how men ruined everything, and not ruined everything, that was extreme, but how men are the cause of a lot of the world's problems. And it's kind of difficult to put words to, but it's blaming men for kind of historical problems that people caused. In kind of unfair ways, just because we didn't do that. It was kind of men, 400 years ago, that has more to do with the fact that it was 400 years ago than the fact that they were men. But a lot of people don't really, they may understand that, and they may perfectly be aware of what's going on there, but the way that they're phrasing it is kind of a really, again, man-hatey, quote unquote, kind of way of phrasing it.
David?
I would have to say that I guess I've experienced it in kind of my own circle of friends or people who I interact with, but kind of in a more broad sense, in that you'll hear people have negative comments or negative opinions about men, but I feel like it will largely stem from a particular experience with a man, an individual, and I feel like a lot of it has to do with kind of generalizations. So I had a bad experience with a man, therefore all men must be like this, or all men must think like this man thought and must have the same issues or cause the same issues. So I feel like sometimes we forget that just because one person behaves in a certain way it does not mean that every member of that group behaves in that way.
Zach, you look like you wanted to say something before I launch into it.
No, it's just interesting to see, because in my experience, like, I'll see those things like on my Facebook page or something. I'll see like these posts of like man bashing and all of that stuff, but it seems more of just like sarcasm or something like that. It doesn't seem like something that's like actually like real. It seems like satire to me when I see it.
Well, here comes the biggest problem with the internet and the internet age, and this is really a your generation problem, because my generation really doesn't get it, and the ones above me really don't get it. Is that intention is very hard to read over text. So when you put something out there and you think that it's being sarcastic or joking and witty, and most people who know me, most stuff that comes out of my mouth is sarcastic. When I type it, it becomes very, very hard to get that intent across. So you might take it that way, but it can also be taken in other ways, in other connotations.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes very, very, so the thing is, you see it, and you see it in one aspect. I see it, and I see it in a completely different aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where a lot of the disconnect starts coming in. We were talking a little bit earlier when we were doing the pre-show conversation. We were talking about language and how certain phrasing, certain words, certain organizations, I think it's a really good time to talk about it, that I may say something one way and you may hear it a different way. And I wonder if this is maybe something that leads to part of the problem,
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can get behind that.
Okay.
I just, I think I've heard so many times in the past that people won't identify themselves as a feminist because feminism is inherently a female thing. Fem is literally in the actual word itself. And that will scare people off.
Oh, should we get it? Yeah, let's get into that one. Because predominantly with feminism, and the more militant feminism, we start seeing the creation of words or adding certain phrases, syllables, consonants to words to make them more feminine. And I wonder if that does start to scare guys off. The biggest one for me, I got into an argument with somebody recently because they were using shiro, so putting an S at the front of hero.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why would you even need to do that?
Why wouldn't they just say heroine?
Yeah, well,
that's also
because it's the feminization of the idea is that it's a feminization of a masculine word that's part of the whole overarching patriarchy. But the word hero has her right in it. It's the first three letters. But to specifically take the word and say shiro, or there's a bunch of other examples that aren't coming to my head right now, but I'm sure everybody's...
I think that's it's an issue with English for sure, and it's the way our language is. And it's not something that's very easily changed. But I think you see it even more in gendered languages, like the romantic languages, like French and all those things, where every even object will be identified as either masculine or feminine. And when there's more than one of a man in a group of a bunch of females, the group is still identified as a male group within the language itself. So that's from such an early age, you're learning that men will overpower women in that sense. And it's so subtle, but I think it will have an effect eventually. You're giving me a look.
How do you mean?
Yeah. Oh boy. No. Zach's
I've had this argument before.
No, I actually know the argument that Zach's trying to make, and it is one of the very feminist arguments, in that the subtlety of language is specifically shifted towards the masculine. There are some arguments about that in English. English being a Germanic root language, borrowing from other languages. What you would predominantly think of as the origins of the word him and her, or man and woman, aren't what you think. But to be perfectly honest, you'd have to be a linguist to understand this, and I'm not. But particularly in the Romance languages, and Latin again being an origin of English. Oh man, see, I'm learning stuff at school. Is that there is predominantly male and female. It's specifically divided, but the second that you add a male into a group of females, it automatically becomes male. So predominantly for those languages at an early age, there is one. Well,
it's inherently binary, right off the bat.
Yeah, but here's, I guess, maybe part of my problem with that, and maybe you can help with this, and you guys can argue. We are a binary species. There is male.
Are we?
We are. There's male and female.
Biologically, yes.
Yeah, biologically.
I would argue differently.
Is there any difference in fairness, or should there be any division based on it? No. But we are two halves of a whole. There's an X and a Y. If you have an argument for it, please go for it.
I think there's more to it than that. I think even if we're talking about sex, I think it's still it's on a spectrum.
Gender is a spectrum, sex is a spectrum, but that's a very kind of anthropologic thing, and that's a very psychological thing in a lot of ways, which doesn't undermine it. It doesn't make it less valid. But in terms of pure biology, species survival, you can think of humans as male, female. And just, I think for the purpose of what David's trying to get at, that's just like what we're discussing, and that, yes, there are other genders. It is a spectrum. I'm not denying that. I'm not trying to downplay that at all. It's just for the sake of how humankind has developed, you can think about male, female reproduction in that sense.
Okay, so using that as using that, where are we going with this?
Well, I'm not entirely sure, and this is the fun part of about these conversations, and I think this is maybe perhaps where some of the disconnect is that you can get very easily bogged down in the details of something when what you're actually trying to talk about is, when we come to the language and the origin of languages, sure, there has been oppression. There has been male over female, and there is a binary system to the language because of the binary biology of this. But how does this contribute to the disconnect? How does the fact that a woman has a pejoratively masculine feature to the word necessitate it having a feminized version, just to get your point across? Let's use Shiro as an example. Like, is that necessary? Like, does it?
Yeah, for me, I question the utility, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it is. I will be perfectly honest. I'm learning about the whole heroine being a feminized version of a masculine word thing right now. But unless you really know the history of the language, then I don't understand why that's a problem. Because if you see just the word hero and the word heroine, I think of those as equal, just opposite sides of one another. I don't see hero as the predominant one or the overbearing masculine one. I just see hero, heroine, male, female, different ways of saying the same thing depending on your gender, and I don't see a problem with that. And yes, while there can be some historical connotations where it's just feminizing a masculine word, and that is bad, I guess. I don't know. I don't really see why and how that would become something that you realistically need to change in order to promote gender equality. I don't see the utility in that if largely people are unaware that, unless people are aware and I'm just ignorant on this, I don't know.
No, close. No, I'm not calling you ignorant in any way, but I think we're getting to it. Zach, do you have any, or David, we've kind of ignored you on this one. I'm sorry. We've been bouncing back and forth. Do you have anything you want to add on that, or?
I don't know. I've just been I've been taking this all in.
It's a little weird, isn't it?
It is a little strange to think about it. It really kind of picks the far reaches of your mind or something like that. To comment on what Greg just said, I think I would have to agree in that sense that, or I don't know if this kind of is on the same page as you are, but I think that it matters more to interpret the meaning of these words rather than just the words themselves. I mean, even if the word in the English language is rooted in a masculine term or something like that, I think you have to look at the meaning of it and the context in which it was used to actually think about what it means. And I think that is more important than simply just where the word comes from.
I also, I also don't really understand how Shiro would be any different. Isn't that just doing the same thing, but in a different way? That, I don't know. Sorry.
I can.
Just another side of the coin that you were talking about, I guess.
Yeah, like I don't see the difference between changing hero to heroine from changing hero to Shiro.
I think, and again, this is real. I can't in any way, shape, or form claim to be an expert on it, but from what I've read and from what I've talked to people about, the idea is that heroine comes at the end of the word and that Shiro puts it at the front. I could be wrong on that completely, but I think we've hit the idea of the disconnect. And here, and this is my 2 cents, and unfortunately we're just about getting to the end of the first half hour, which is horrible because we're just getting into it. What we're talking about is established male ideology and established male ways of speaking. And for a feminist to get their idea across, to break out of that comfort zone, things have to be different and have to have a language change, and guys are sitting here not understanding why it's necessary. Because we see things as, well, it's just this or just that. And a feminist sees it as, well, no, just because when you say this is the way things have always been, traditionally for women, the way things have always been has actually been pretty bad. So for a guy to sit there and say, well, I don't see why we need to change this, it almost starts to dismiss part of the conversation, and this is where the disconnect starts to happen, at least for me.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's we dismiss it after we hear something like that. I think that's what like starts a conversation, like not understanding something. I think it provides questions and everything of the like.
I think part of the problem too, though, is I can see where people are coming from there, but I wouldn't say that every feminist holds that opinion and believes and strongly about altering that much. And I think that's also where a disconnect is because there's a lot of disunity in the movement based on the like kind of nitty-gritty details like that one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that's just it. And here's where the thing goes, where you'll have particularly a lot of guys who, like Zach, I know you're quite interested in feminism.
Mm-hmm.
I am as well, and you guys are as well, because you're here, you're engaging in the conversation. But when you step outside of the comfort zone with people that you know and try to engage in the conversation, and somebody pulls out well, you're using this in the wrong connotation, you're wrong about this, you're wrong about that, you're a man.
Well, that stops the conversation.
Exactly. So, I kind of wonder if this is part of what the problem that's going on is.
Mm-hmm. I think I've been blessed with an environment where I can say something, and like if I am wrong, or like if I do say something offensive or anything like that, I won't be called out, I'll be called in. Like someone will like explain to me why that could be like explained as like, or why that could be viewed as offensive or viewed in like a certain light, and like just something I need to think about before I say something like that again. Mm-hmm. And like it opens up a conversation rather than stopping it.
Mm-hmm. But go.
I generally don't get that. So I can see where you're coming from, and I'd be that, but I have had different experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to go along with that. I think that perhaps part of the problem is that some men might be afraid to chime in on this and give their 2 cents in a group of people they don't know for fear of backlash and criticism. I mean, some men might just say, well, I don't want to say how I might feel because if I might come off as being insensitive towards women, and then that would cause some backlash for me. But I think in that regard, I think it's better to be, of course, respectful, but just clear on how you feel and what you mean when you say your opinions, to show that, look, I don't hate women. I think there should be equality, but I think like on this issue, this is how I feel, and yeah.
Well, that's actually an interesting statement, though, because you're coming to something that I've noticed I do, and I'm not entirely sure if it's because I have a British background or because I'm Canadian. And we'll talk about it in about 3 seconds after I finish my thought. I find that whenever I start to state my opinion, I apologize for it and preface it every time. And I wonder about that. So, unfortunately, that was my alarm. We've got to do the commercial break, and we'll be back in 2 minutes, give or take, something like that.
Hi, I'm Yoav. I'm a 4th-year student in consumer behavior, and you're listening to 94.9 CHW.